Hello there. Welcome once again. This week in WordPress. I've no idea what episode we're on. It's 149 would be my best guess. We've done quite a few of them.
49.
149. Okay, I got it right. I'm pleased with myself. As always, I'm joined by this chap over here, Paul Lacey. Hi, Paul.
Hello, you right?
Yeah, good. Paul's got a nice new microphone, as have I, actually. Quite pleased with it. And I'm joined down there on the screen, it's like Celebrity Squares, by Leo Mindel. How are you doing, Leo?
I'm very well. I haven't got a new microphone, nor have I got a new camera.
No.
Have you got a new camera, Nathan?
I'm going to get a new camera. This is a sore point. The camera that I'm currently using belongs to a chap called Leo Mindel, and he lent me it during lockdown because they were completely unavailable in the shops. And
apparently snow and the roads and everything.
I can count on no fingers the amount of times I've been to the post office to return it, and I promise that I will. You'll need to give me a new postal address by the sounds of it. Leo's a bit in the dark. He's lost his lights this week, but if you're listening on the audio,
I've packed them because I'm moving.
I tell you what, though, even without the lights on you, the quality of your video is always extraordinarily good. So it still looks great, even if you're a little bit on the dark side, which sounds really Star Warsy, but it's not. We are this week in WordPress. We are a sort of, how to describe it? We talk about the weekly WordPress news, the stuff that's gone on during the last week in WordPress. Just before we begin, though, a few bits of housekeeping. wpbuilds.com is our regular domain. You can find everything that we produce over there. If there's anything that you like about the stuff that we produce, then please head over to this link. It's the subscribe link at the top of the page. And if you go there, you'll get to our subscribe page. There's things like our Facebook group, YouTube channel, and buttons to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast player. We actually have a sort of quirky way of doing this show. We record it on a Monday, and then I repurpose the audio and the video on a Tuesday. So it's a little bit strange. I'm not quite sure if the workflow is perfect as yet, but that's the way it's working. And lastly, wpbuilds.com/deals. If you're in the market for a product or service in the WordPress space, go check that page out. These deals have been provided to us by the product creators, and not one of them has asked us to take one down yet. So it's a pretty reliable place. If you go to it, look at the deals, and then just memorize them and think in a year's time, wasn't that on that page? Chances are it still will be. So that's wpbuilds.com/deals. But enough of that nonsense. Let's get into the WordPress news, shall we? Various articles. There will be some show notes beneath this if you're listening to this not live, but we'll try to make it pretty obvious as the show goes on exactly what we're talking about. And Paul's going to kick us off this week with something on make.wordpress.org.
Yeah, so you might have heard of something called full site editing within WordPress.org that's coming for us, that is part of the whole Gutenberg project. And you might be wondering, how are they getting on with this project? And Josepha Hayden, who is the boss of the WordPress.org project, from what I understand, has created a post for us called Full Site Editing and Themes, Where Things Are. It's a fairly short article, and I think that the thing that stands out to me is the subheadings. Okay, so you've got the main article, and the subheadings are what you should know about milestones, what you should know about the challenges, and what you should know about the timeline. Now, the final word in each of those titles, milestones, challenges, timeline, those are three words that fill me with stress, usually in any project that I'm looking at. So someone wants to know, what are the milestones? When are we going to hit this? What are the challenges? And when's it all going to get done? And in the article, she gives an idea of that timeline and the challenges. And I have to say, they've got a lot of work to do. I've tested out the full site editing now. I was kindly introduced to some of the people on the full site editing team by Birgit, and I've had a chance to have a look, and it kind of works, but it needs a lot doing it, I think. But the plan is to get this full site editing into core by June, and there is a lot of work there. One of the things that they talk about in the article is that this whole project has 6 main milestone projects. And Josepha talks about some of the problems, the challenges with that, is that these 6 projects are happening on their own, but somehow they've all got to be merged together for this to actually all work. And I think that you can. I don't know if anyone's watching, but my facial expressions. I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible, but I just want to know what's the rush. That's my main point. I don't understand why this has to be done by April, and it needs to be in core by June. I don't get it because I've tried it. I don't know how they're going to get there, quite honestly. I'm sorry for being so pessimistic. I didn't mean to. I meant to be more optimistic about this. But I can't see it. They are talking about MVP, minimum viable product. But the thing is, as soon as you put something into core, that's the foundation you've got to build from. So going back on that is difficult. That's all I've got to say on that, really.
Yeah.
But good luck to the team. And thank you to all the team who are working on it. They're all working super hard. That's clear. I can see that from when I've had a look on the inside in the Slack group. I wonder if the milestones and the challenges and the timeline is unrealistic.
Yeah, it's
not happened before. We've all seen buildings planned, Trump Towers or whatever it was. I've seen a documentary about that, or any capital builds or major IT projects, where it's the UK's testing system for COVID got rushed, doesn't work properly. I'm a bit worried about that.
There's a line in the piece by Joe Seffer. I'm showing it on the screen now. It's quite near the bottom. It says April 2021 for the prototype in the Gutenberg plugin is aggressive. So the Gutenberg plugin is kind of where they test all this stuff out, and then hopefully the idea is that will be pushed into core. And she describes it as aggressive, but also very, very attainable. When you had a little play this week, was there any sort of standout things which made you think this is a long way off, or is it more that you're just used to a full suite of working tools? I know that you're a user of Beaver Builder, and all of that works, and it's been working for years, and everything behaves as expected. Was it just the sort of juxtaposition of those two things, or were there bits where you thought, I just don't even know what to do here?
Juxtaposition is probably the right word, not necessarily just comparing it to Beaver Thema or other tools that are similar to that, but any tool that is looking at these three defined concepts in most information systems these days, which is structure, design, and content, and the separation between those things and how conceptually you separate them in any user interface. I think that the system that they've got at the moment, trying to merge these things into one, I know that's one of Matt Mullenweg's big concepts in his mind. He talks about it on a few podcasts. You've got this over here, this over here, this over here. Let's pull all those things together. Well, it might work, and if they pull it off, I'll be really happy. But historically, there's a reason why those three layers of things have been quite clearly separate in any system, and it's because they tend to need to be, because you've got different sides of the brain thinking about those things. So when you flip from structure to content to design in one system that looks kind of the same, it's challenging for the user, very challenging. So I don't know. It's a big job they've got, and I don't envy Josefa and the people who are in it, working really hard on this and with these deadlines.
One of the other things that occurs to me is that companies like Element or Beaver Builder, Divi, and all of that, they've got their own roadmap and their own set of customers who presumably they listen to, but basically they're on their own. They can just do what they want. They can just implement things. That's number one today. We're going to do that, and we'll work on that until it's finished, and we'll scrap it if it's not needed. And they don't have quite the legacy that WordPress have got. And so, you can imagine the millions and millions of websites where they need to make sure that this is all working. So there's that baggage. But it also occurred to me, I was lying awake last night actually thinking about this, believe it or not. And it just occurred to me that has WordPress in the past, can you think of any? I've been using it for it's probably about 7 years, so I don't go that far back. Have they ever taken on anything as big as this whole Gutenberg thing? Not only the block editor, but now the full site editing. Because up until now, they were using a third-party software, this tiny MCE, the classic editor. That was just all sort of done somebody else was taking care of that, and they just plugged it in and made sure that it worked with all of the constraints that WordPress has got. And it sort of feels to me that this is really new ground. And so a commercial company doing this, where they can just deploy whoever they want for any length of time, that's one thing. But we've got the open source project trying to fix this. That's a really different beast.
It is. We were talking earlier about, first of all, I don't know if you remember, Nathan, but I'm sure I mentioned to you about a week ago that I genuinely lost sleep the day that I tried out full site editing.
Yeah, you did. You said,
Did I tell you that? Yeah, I had a really bad night's sleep. And that was one of the things that you said you were lying awake thinking about it. I was lying awake thinking about it as well. And I was lying awake stressed for the people working on it under the deadlines that they've got. I thought, how are they going to get to something that isn't a bad foundation potentially? I'm trying to learn more about it. And that's why I joined the Slack group and started connecting with people so that I can try and understand a bit more and remove some of the probably incorrect assumptions that I've developed from the circles that I mix in. But if you look at something like an Olympic team, we spoke about this earlier, you've got all sorts of individuals from doing their own training things, coming together. And that Olympic team won't be successful if it doesn't have a structure of management that is appropriate for what the challenge is they're trying to do. So yeah, if you want to bring an Olympic team together and the plan is to run around for a bit and have fun, just have a good time, it doesn't really matter. But I think if you really want to make a world-beating enterprise or a world-beating product or a world-beating team, you need to look back at history and see how people did that. And I don't think that the open source methodology for the full site editing projects and the block editor in general has enough of that structure in place. And that's why I just would like them to consider slowing down a little bit. Again, I could be completely wrong. I'm just saying it as I see it.
No, I think
what you're effectively saying there, Paul, is that innovation, it's easy to innovate in a small team. It's easy to come out with ideas and concepts and to move forward. But when you start getting things into a committee environment, trying to move those things in that agile approach forward becomes very, very difficult. And if you look at the way that we have in WordPress, is that a lot of those innovations start off in small teams. A lot of those innovations start off in small companies. And when they become super successful, the winning one, if that's the right word, gets chosen they then come part of core. And maybe hypothetically, what should have happened is it's like, okay, we want to move towards a block style editing system. All of those out there, and the Beaver Builders, the Elementals, etc., we'll choose the one that wins rather than come out with an alternative. It is super tough. I think you're right. I mean, if you look at any software company, so if you take, for example, Microsoft, you ask, did they innovate any of their software, or did they create it in the first place? Word, Excel, these were all purchases a long, long time ago. Maybe there is nothing left that shows of what there is there, but the core concept was an external purchase.
Yeah, it's interesting. And with there being so many successful page builders out there who probably could be acquired, brought into the team, it's an interesting argument. I just don't know.
Also, we don't know what's going to be the winning thing. One of the companies out there who's really good at buying things, working out if it works, and if it doesn't work, dropping it, is Google. There's so many products that Google, you sit there and you scratch your head. Like Picasa is a good example. Who had a picture library in Picasa that's now defunct.
Yeah.
So many things. Some of them they get it really badly wrong, but some of them, that they come out a winner. I am a bit worried at the moment about the Gutenberg block approach. Not because I don't believe in the approach. Sorry, that's the wrong words. But will this be the winner? It seems to have got stuck a number of times when it's tough.
Yeah, well, I guess time will tell. The surefire way for it to fail is if nobody contributes. And so if you go over to this page, there's various links. The one that I'm showing here is showing, oh, wrong one, apologies, it's this one, is the sort of milestones that Josefa says are going to run concurrently. So the first one is infrastructure and UI, browsing, styling, theme blocks, the query block or query block, and navigation block, all of which need to kind of all be working, I would have thought, all at the same time. So they need to all be brought to fruition. So they're going to be working in parallel. And then hopefully by the time that 5.7 drops, we'll have gradual adoption, which is milestone 7. So it's interesting that she's mentioning gradual adoption. Let's just see what happens.
But what you may find, Nathan, is that while being the positive to the negative of whether it ends up being Gutenberg, we have to move to this sort of approach. It may be that this is the opening gambit that enables people to get away from what we had before. You mentioned before about editors, about they used TinyMC or CK Editor. All of these things were external editors that eventually you need to bring in, because before some of us remember writing things in HTML or just text. That was it. Your story was written in text. You couldn't go on with that for much longer.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because looking around on the internet to various SaaS products, and we'll probably come back to this meme time and time again, there are some companies, fairly small companies I might add, who really, to my mind, have hit this problem, just nailed this on the head. I won't mention the names, but I've got a few SaaS apps that I've acquired or inspected over time, and they've got complicated text editors that drop in images and left and right columns and basically everything that Gutenberg purports to do. Obviously, they haven't taken on full site editing, but they nailed it on day one when the platform came out. So yeah, it's just interesting. I'm really bullish about it, I have to say. I think this is all going in the right direction. I haven't spent the time in the community like Paul has, but I suspect that if you rewound history,
it's all about a little bit of time.
Yeah,
but it's been very educational so far, and it's put some worries to rest, but then raised other ones.
Yeah, but also I think that's probably a good thing. The fact that you've had these worries now makes you start to think about the way you've got to prepare your business for it. But okay, let's move on. That was interesting. Now, I don't know if this next piece was as a consequence of what happened over the last couple of weeks, because Josefa wrote that article, and on various other channels there were people just sort of saying, I am really confused. What is the MVP? What is the minimum viable product that is full site editing? And so this came around. Now, Josefa, who we just mentioned wrote the previous piece, has launched a podcast. She's calling it WP Briefing. This first episode is 12 and a half minutes roughly long. And it's something, to my mind anyway, it's something quite new in this space, because it's somebody right at the top of Automatic just talking about what's going on. Now, she says in the piece that she's had this in mind to do for a very long time. She's been hoping to do it. And, she's probably one of the more busy people in our community, I would have thought. But she's decided to make this something that she's going to do. If memory serves, it's going to be a once every fortnight, every 14 days or so. And she is literally just going to express the following things. The intention is that there's 3 bullet points: an easy to digest overview of a cool WP philosophy, a highlight of a community success story or a noteworthy contributor, a small list of things to know about in the coming weeks. Now, I'll be really interested in point 3 of all of those 3, just because from somebody at her pay grade, if you like, telling us what's going on behind the curtain, I think will be really, really interesting. She's got a fabulous way with words. I was lucky enough to interview her at WordCamp Europe, and she's just one of those people who exudes. She's just so erudite. She speaks and everything seems to be considered, even though she's making it up on the fly because she didn't know what my questions were. And the same I felt with this podcast. I listened to it from start to finish, and I just got the sense of somebody who, I don't know if it was scripted or not. It felt like it was scripted, but I could well believe that it wasn't. But it feels like if you're really into what's going on in WordPress from a high level, this is one to add to your podcast player. And you can see on the screen If you go, there's links to subscribe on your normal players, and it's just go to Google WP briefing, and you'll find it was #1 from day one in the Google results. So you'll be able to get it that way. Did anybody listen to that? Either of you?
Yeah.
What did you make of it?
I think it's a really great move by Josepha.
I do.
And there's a number of angles that I find interesting about this. Matt Medeiros has just interviewed Matt Mullenweg, and that interview is on the Matt Report podcast.
I haven't heard it yet. Yeah.
It's very good. I'd still trying to digest what the answers to the questions meant, because Matt Mullenweg is an extremely good, he'd make a very good politician, in terms of getting asked tough questions and stuff like that. With Josepha, I feel like she's addressing the need for a bit of PR in the way that Matt Mullenweg would probably be. It'd be great if Matt Mullenweg did a briefing, or from time to time he was on this briefing, just chipping in with a few things, so you could kind of get a feel. I think when you see written word versus audio, spoken word, you get a bit more a feel of the intent of what people are saying versus just the words that come out. And I like this. I'm going to be really interested to see what happens in every week as the project continues. And I also felt, this is something that we were talking about earlier, Nathan, that I wonder if one of the reasons that Josepha has done this is for an outlet for herself, being at the top of this extremely stressful, I assume it's an extremely stressful project, and putting things out and seeing response in comments, not always very positive. Now, I know I've been critical just 5 minutes ago, but I'm being constructively critical and I'm being nice, whereas you can read comments on things and feel that people are really attacking you. I wonder if this will be helpful for Josepha to have an outlet for some of the challenges that she talks about in the project, so she can speak about those audibly to people. The people who would then comment on those blog posts or little podcast would at least see the human that they're commenting at, and be a bit more aware of that. And also, if someone like Josepha is under a lot of pressure, having this evidence that here I put out how it is, this is what people said, it's much more of a human conversation now than it was a few weeks ago without the podcast, then the other big players in the conversation, Matt Mullenweg and whoever else is up there making the big decisions as well, would be able to assess the feedback more effectively. So I think this is going to be an excellent outlet and an excellent internal feedback collector as well.
So there's a couple of things I'll add to this. First of all, Matt Mullenweg was on a room on Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago, doing a state of the word. For those that haven't used Clubhouse, it is an audio only social media channel, which at the moment, or platform, which at the moment is only open to iPhone users, so iOS. Very interesting platform because you need to be sponsored to join, and if you do misbehave, you not only you get removed, but also your sponsor gets removed. So it's quite easy to see who is who, and it's very easy to follow that through. Where I find these two stories collide is that we're talking about audio and the validity of audio over text, and considering that we're on a WordPress, which is a text-based delivery engine, and we're talking about that the teams and people at Automatic and other areas are moving into using audio over text, is quite I don't know what to say about that, or what to think about that. Yeah. How does that sound from your side, Paul?
Yeah, that's one of the things. You can see that there's a reason behind it and it makes sense, but it's difficult to process exactly what impact it's going to have yet. But what we know is that audio has a big impact these days.
But do you think that means that people are not trusting the written word, or that they're looking for validity in listening to somebody because they've become tainted by what we see in writing, and particularly in things like Twitter, where the toxicity around posts has become almost to the point when that social media platform is very hard to operate in.
Can I just throw something in here? And it would be, I don't know if I've still kept it or closed the tab, but if you look at on the screen, sorry for those people who are listening to this, I'm back to the original post, and it's a post, and it's actually pretty light on links. But if you look at a post traditionally on make.wordpress.org, it's full of like hyperlinks to everything. One word will be a track ticket, and it'll hyperlink over here, and there'll be another. In other words, there's just this miasma of stuff going on. And I feel that if you're just a jobbing freelancer in the WordPress space, you go to the WordPress community and you look at this stuff, and you are deluged with too many different things that you could be doing. You go into the Slack, the WordPress Slack. There's just hundreds of channels you could join. There's hundreds and hundreds of things. And it just feels to me like this is a really nice way that Josepha could take the temperature over the last week and address one hot topic in a way that's consumable without the fluff of links or something else that you've got to go to prove that that's true. It's just, here's the way it is. I'm going to donate a third of my time, so maybe 4 or 5 minutes, to this pressing issue, which just came up over and over again this week. And if you want to hear me say it and put it into my own words, I just think it carries more impact. Now, I would imagine that podcasting isn't going to kill text-based content by any means, but it certainly supplements it.
So what the point is, though, it's interesting to see that Matt turned up on Clubhouse to effectively do, in the past, whenever it's been the state of the word, it's been a big, long process that we've all got to be ready for it. It's going to be this time ahead. Clubhouse, you can't you can pre-record, but they don't like it. You can't record anything on Clubhouse, so nothing is kept. It disappears 30 seconds, 1 hour after it's there. It's just an interesting move that they're doing to spread the word out there.
They're keeping this sort of in-house, actually, in a way, because the mechanism that they're using on the website to play the audio is actually a WordPress plugin. It's called Seriously Simple Podcasting. It is, by coincidence, the same one that we use. It's bolted onto Castos, which we talked about. Matt Medeiros, he works for them with Craig Hewitt and Jonathan Bossinger to create it. So they are kind of keeping it. The editing interface for this is all in WordPress. Obviously, you'll have to record it elsewhere, but yeah, it's fascinating. I just thought it was a really nice attempt to bring it back round and put some voice to it. And as Paul said, it just feels different. You can feel the cadence of people's voices and the way that they're, maybe one week she'll sound more exasperated than others. Maybe an explanation will come out which just hits the nail on the head. Who knows? Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So that was, I should probably mention the URL. That was welcome to your WP briefing. Oh, I did say, go Google it. You'll find it easily enough. So complete change of direction. This is a piece on WP Tavern by Justin Tadlock entitled Skinning the WordPress Admin, Custom CSS Properties on the Way. So I don't know what to make of this. I by the looks of it, I think only good things are going to happen. But when I joined WordPress, like I said, about 7 years ago, the first thing that struck me was how attractive the UI was. I was from Drupal, and the Drupal UI was basically just sort of hanging together. It was terrible. Whatever kind of default they stuck with 5 years previous to that, they just kept going with it. And I came to WordPress and I was delighted by the way it looked. I just felt at home right away. However, 7 years have passed, and to my mind, it hasn't changed one iota since then. Literally, I think if you go back to the version that I was looking at that day, everything's the same pretty much. There's probably a few little contrivances here and there. But so in here, we've got this idea in WordPress 5.7, a milestone is to come up with some CSS custom properties. And the idea being that we'll be able to use those throughout the UI. It'll be a way of sort of declaring this is how it should be from now on. And you're looking at this, if you're on the screen, you can see Kirsty Burgoyne. I don't know if she actually made this drawing. Oh, no, it's by somebody called Kelly Choice Dwan. They're trying to sort of do things like figure out what the color palette would look like. My feeling is that SaaS apps, generally speaking, are now superior in the way that they look and the way that they work than WordPress admin. So just to launch the conversation with us guys, do you think we need a bit of an update? And well, that's it really.
Yes. You wanted a longer answer.
Yeah, well, you can give me that. That's fine.
So there's two things to unpack from this. Time moves on and everything, and if we only look at very fast-moving products, for example, an iPhone or an Android phone, and you look at how they change and iterate over a number of years, it moves very quickly. That is the case. You're absolutely right. WordPress backend now feels old, and it needs to move forward. The problem with moving forward is that you can only move forward if you have a framework, or you end up making it really complex. And what this, to me, is approaching, or what it's trying to solve, is the ability to enable people to change some of it, but not having to worry about where it sits in the future, so that there is standards involved. And that's key and critical, so that you can actually move that palette forward, you can actually move the look and the feel, and hopefully break very few other things in there. And you've covered very similar discussions in the past about notifications in the admin system and other things that sit inside the admin system, or where they sit, to make it better as a consistent UX. This we're looking, we're staring at a color palette table, which we just wish we had Pisha on this call now, because she would be telling us what's right and wrong about our interpretation of that color palette. Is actually a great stage forward. I mean, we were talking earlier, does this cause problems to certain developers and certain third-party plugins that don't follow those standards? Where do you see that coming back?
You made the exact same point to me in a sort of roundabout way, Paul, just before we pressed record on this. You were talking about one of the companies who you feel have nailed the UI interface over their entire suite of products, and that was Google with their material design. I've got to say, it does look a long way ahead, doesn't it? You open up any app, whether it be on the phone or the desktop, the Google stuff, I personally think looks beautiful always. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
We can't criticize WordPress, whoever, the designers that have been involved in that over the years. The fact is that Google have zillions of dollars, and I wonder how much was invested into creating their material design system, and they use that material design system now across all their products. So they make a product, the product has the design system. It doesn't even need to think about what color represents learning. It's already done for them. I think it's purple. The WordPress UI, as a result, does look old, because we see so much Android, we see so much iOS, we see so much Mac OS, and Windows to a certain extent as well. And those systems have had the teams dedicated to working on that small detail that forms a foundation that everything else sits on top of. Again, it's one of the reasons why I get a little bit worried about the Gutenberg project, because I feel that it's been a bit rushed at times. Think about like this, though. A strange decision was made in one of the recent versions of WordPress, one of the recent major versions of WordPress, was to, whenever you're editing something in the block editor, this was Matt Mullenweg's request. So it just went in at the end, and
remember this, yeah.
When you edit anything in the block editor, you lose the sidebar. So you're in full site editing, not full site, you're in full screen editing mode.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder.
It became the default, didn't it, when you just first installed it? Or that's right.
Yeah, and I think that I can understand better now the reason for that. That the UI for Gutenberg doesn't have a design system behind it, not that I'm aware of. They're making it up as they're going along, and that is not their fault. It's just how the open source approach is coming out in the wash. So you can understand why Matt Mullenweg would be like, this looks a bit weird. We've got this thing over here which looks dated, and we've got this thing over here which doesn't really have any system behind it. Let's hide one of them. Now, we can't hide the block editor when you're editing because that's the thing you're doing. So we'll hide the sidebar. And I think what Kirsty's doing, Kirsty has been on this show as well. She's a friend of mine. She's actually the co-organizer of the Birmingham WordPress meetup. And so she's...
Did you deliberately say that in a Brummie accent?
There was me. I wasn't going to do the accent. So.
I'm a native Brummie. I just try and hide it a bit when I'm doing this. But as Leo said, to me, this is like a big step in the right direction. There's no chance that Kirsty can come in and go, I've created an entire design system, but she's moving this forward and saying, we need some kind of design system, and the colors have got out of control. So let's make a step in that right direction.
But do you think, does this not remind you? This reminds me very much of when people started using Twitter Bootstrap, and the fact that the Bootstrap didn't create a platform. It didn't create an end tool. It didn't even make it look nice. You saw pictures and you went, why would anybody want to do that? And then you go, oh, right, I see. You've actually put down rails that line these things up so everything fits in, so that in the future it fits in. And you actually see that comes forward in terms of how you then design things, so that when you start doing mobile first and coming up, that the size of the blocks fit. So we're now getting more and more used to seeing very similar sized blocks. And then that makes things go forward. A classic example of this, going back way back, is the size of a brick. A brick that you build a house is actually designed to be exactly the right size for somebody to hold in one hand. That's how the sizing of bricks came about. But you now look at that, and that's how you see houses are built on that size. If the brick size changed, it will be very difficult to sort of then fit everything back together again. You know, you have to have standards, and this is putting a standard in where I would say there's potentially wasn't one in the past.
I like it. I like the masonry segue. That was cool.
I learned something today.
Yeah. I had no idea that it was
didn't know that.
But it is probably makes common sense. There's quite a few pieces of commentary coming in, so we'll actually go into some of those, because I think some of them making some good points. But I would make the point.
I think some really nice comments from Agency Trailblazer, but
we'll get to him. Especially the first one.
I'll call you after the show, Lee, and we'll arrange everything.
So this is the first stage, getting this sort of like CSS properties and color palette, by the looks of it, nailed down. And then it says, just to be clear, Justin Tadlock wrote this. It says the second stage will be to look at how to implement the CSS custom properties with a system that makes sense. So the scaffolding, the rails that you described, that means doing the dreaded work of naming things. And so essentially, I suspect we'll come up with some names, WP_warning or WP_success or something along those lines. And so that just every plugin developer can ignore them and put their own UI on something, like we've seen a billion times.
They'll ignore them once. And then their plugin will break. And it will be up to them to fit into the system. And that's life. That's life.
Let's put up some comments. First, we'll do that one, but we won't mention it in the audio. We'll go to this one.
I've had enough now. I've already got two.
Yeah. Okay, it's about babies. Agency Trailblazer, which is Lee Matthew Jackson. Gutenberg makes the back end rather complex and probably very hard to improve. Controversial, I know. Now, that was kind of your point, Paul, wasn't it? That the two are so different now. The Gutenberg editor and the admin area are so different that it was just apropos to hide one. At the point we are editing it.
How are we going to improve this? Just hide the bad bit. Just it's a bit like when you're selling a house or something and someone comes to view it, you shove everything into one room and hope that they don't open that door. And when they do, you have to explain, sorry, we're moving house.
That room doesn't come with the house. It's going to get updated.
Don't worry. There's actually a room in there.
Bernard Greneau, who's obviously very frequently on this show. I don't get the dated discussion sometimes. Functionality is greater than looks.
I disagree with that.
I was going to say I get what you're saying, but I don't agree.
Disagree with that. If the that's just saying, like, all he's saying is the chocolate has to taste nice. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
good. I love it. Straight in on the chocolate analogy, which of course is what Bernard does. That was great. I agree. You know, if it came packaged in a piece of cling film, you wouldn't want it. But if it comes in a nice shiny box,
we don't know because Bernard still hasn't sent us any chocolate.
Yeah, we still don't know what his chocolate is like. And then he goes on to say, 100% agree with the UI and the UX of Gutenberg, which it lacks, especially when it comes to meta boxes and settings. Full site editing mode, Chris Hughes says, he tries to turn it off about 100 sites, he says, it feels like, and it never remembers. I hate it, were his words. And then
must say with Christopher, I know we've all got to update our avatars, but that one is, for those that can see it, that is so out of date.
Okay, I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment. Mine needs updating. I've got short hair in mine.
That's right. We all look different than a year ago.
That's it. The COVID has done it to us. We need new COVID avatars. Right. Okay. We're going to move on because time is not stopping for us. What's the next one? Paul. Oh, actually, no, I snuck one in, which didn't make it into the show notes. So sorry about this. I'll probably just mention this. I don't think this is going to be much use in terms of a conversation, but about 18 months ago, something like that, Automatic launched this version of WordPress. So imagine WordPress.com. You can just sort of buy into it and you pay a small amount and you get a website. But imagine you could buy in at a significantly higher price point and you're a small newspaper and they just give you the CMS built with everything you need to run a newspaper without having to think about the tech stuff. You just, you're a journalist, you write the article and you click publish and it's all taken care of. Well, that's Newspack. And as of this week, Newspack has reached the milestone of 60 publishing houses have launched, which doesn't really sound like a lot when you think about it. You're suddenly sort of sitting there thinking that's not really much, but it's the price point that's interesting here. The price point ranges between 500 to 2,000 a month. So quick back of the postcard calculation. Let's say they're all on $1,000 as an aggregate. That's $60,000 a month going into the back pocket of Automatic for a service which I would imagine was not significantly hard to put together. I say that in complete ignorance. Maybe it really was, but it feels like the experts at Automatic could do this for just any industry fairly quickly. So I don't suppose anybody's got anything to say with that. If they have, jump in now. If not, I'll move on.
So a couple of things really quickly to say about it is that the SEO for news is very, very different to the SEO for everything else. You're trying to put it into a different part of the Google and other cycles. It is very, very time sensitive of getting news out, and it makes a huge difference where you rank and rate for news stories. We've only got to look at our own mobile phones, and when there's an announcement that comes out, and the phones goes beep 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 beep, and we're looking at who gets there first in your notifications, and people then will start turning off other notifications, which is not the one that they're getting first, and the news source. So it is very important. Also, I'd argue that as where WordPress comes from, or where WordPress should be going to, from moving from a blogging platform in the long distance past to a news delivery system, this is quite important. If they've got this right, then it is going to be a big driver against other huge CMSs that are out there that other news agencies use, and is a small amount of money to pay for that service.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing for me, because it would be very difficult for me to sell a website and get that kind of retainer. That's just not the work I've been used to. But like Leo says, if you're a publishing house and your business is to write journalistic pieces and post them, and you want everything to just work in the back end, this is peanuts to make it work. But it is interesting. I don't know if there's another rival service, but you're right about the SEO stuff. I frequently look at kind of like news feeds, aggregated news on like Google provide that for me in my Android phone. And as soon as I've read that piece once, which is the first time I see it, I'm not going to then read it on, let's say I see it on the BBC, I'm not going to go and read it on The Guardian if I've seen it already, or whatever other paper I might be consuming. So that's a really good point. Getting stuff out there and it always being up, and yeah. Anyway, there we go. Paul, anything?
Yeah. The most successful products that launch tend to take a customer's problem and reduce the friction to that problem, or completely remove the friction altogether. And that's usually a good product has that in mind when it's been designed. And I think if you look at the news industry now, apart from you've got all the gatekeepers, the major channels and stuff like that, and journalists aren't exactly getting pay rises at the moment. As a rule, it's a difficult thing to have. A lot of news is coming from single sources, if that's the major channels, etc. And I think this is good because I feel like WordPress.com Automatic have looked at this problem and looked at the friction for these news agencies and small news companies to produce content on a budget. And I agree, it's a very good price point, I think, for a done-for-you solution. And they've successfully launched this product, and it appears to be working for these 60 news sites.
Yep.
Now, there was another article that we covered just the other day where Automatic was looking at doing websites for $5,000. This was addressed in Matt Medeiros' interview with Matt Mullenweg just a couple of days ago. And I did feel satisfied with Matt Mullenweg's answer on that. He said, look, we know that we could be this isn't word for word, but the impression I got was that he was saying, we would love to be able to send tons of web building implementation work to the community, the blue collar web developers or web implementers. We can't launch that without testing it first on a small segment. So he was kind of saying, Matt Mullenweg was kind of saying that this websites for $5,000 thing kind of is getting launched as a test to see if there's an appetite for it, see if the price point is right. And if it works, then they're not going to send it all to Upwork and the other company that he mentioned. They're going to look at opening that up to a community of people, a bit like the old jobs board on the WordPress.org website. So to me, this is something that nobody seems to have got too upset about this, because it's not exactly looking like it's stealing food from people's tables. It seems to be saying this is a really cost-effective way to do something good for companies that have got a budget and need to do something. And to be honest, if I got approached as a independent web developer, for instance, and I needed to see, and a client came to me and said, hey, can you make me a news website? I'd probably go and check out some of these news sites, because clearly they've got 60 outlets now feeding back to them. And I'm starting to think that we can learn something from the success that this project has as independent site builders and implementers. So I think well done to this project. I think it's done well, and it's a good product.
I had my doubts that it was going to get to 50 or 60, so it has.
Just very quickly, just finishing on from my side, it's like any other vertical market. So this is why you've got WooCommerce, which is a vertical market in e-commerce, why you've got other vertical markets. And as Paul has already said, another vertical market, or potentially, is the smaller site, those builds. Eventually, you end up with a product. For it to be successful, it needs to customize itself to meet some of the demands. And when you've got a demand like news that you've got multiple customers on, then you've got a need. The one I think will be interesting to see is if Yoast come back on this and they come out with a better implementation of their news delivery elements.
Yeah. You got to think as well is that news is just one of those things where you've got big teams pushing out content probably multiple times a day. You really are touching the website thousands of times every week. So, you just want that to be under the stewardship of somebody who knows what they're doing. Okay, that was, I forgot to mention, so I'll do it now. That was Sarah Gooding, Newspack Publishers Showcase with 60 newsrooms, launched on WP Tavern. Next up, we have...
I think we should just skip this one and come back to this one, because Leo has a breaking news story which feels relevant.
I see that. I saw that, actually. I'll stick that on the page. You'll have to bear with me whilst you look at the default page on Brave. Have you actually got a chance to read this now? I read it the wrong way round. I read it that Parsley, which is a company I've never heard of, were buying WP VIP, and I literally went, what? And I think it's the other way around.
So what it seems, as my understanding, is Parsley, and thank you for pronouncing them, because I was reading it .ly, and obviously it's Parsley. And you can see why their logo has been acquired by VIP. And Parsley, from what I understand, is a content analytics engine for larger sites, which is why it makes sense to be sitting in VIP. Although that was never my thought, that VIP was ever going to do services directly, unless I am mistaken. I thought VIP always passed services to third parties to do stuff with, but you know, that's the sign. So they've just announced today on the 8th of February that they're purchasing it, and they're going to be rolling out the tools from Parsley to the VIP client base. That's my understanding. Have I read that right, Paul?
Well, I haven't even had a chance to read it
That
yet.
seems to be what it's saying. But I think it feels like this is the first of a blog post that will be followed up by some more clarification.
I think we should follow it up when we fully understand what it all means.
Let's read it and take it next week. So you heard it here first, except that it was published on WPVIP.com. We're just blatantly stealing it, but well spotted, Leo.
No, you did hear it here first. You read it first on WPVIP.
You're right.
You heard it here first.
Okay,
because we said it.
Yeah. We said it. I like it.
The power of audio.
We'll come back to that story this time next week with a bit more insight. Right. So, Paul, this is Pixel Grade.
I'm a big fan of Pixel Grade and their articles that they write about the WordPress ecosystem and plugins and products. And one of the things that caught me about this article, there's two aspects to this. There's a technical thing and there's a society thing. Right. So the technical thing is, this article is called "Improving the Word." Oh, could you put that back up?
Yeah. Sorry.
Improving the WordPress comment system to encourage conversations. So, Pixel Grade they've got a very strong design skill set. They make themes, plugins, and they're very high end in the level of their design that they do. And they've taken one aspect of WordPress, which is one of the most important at the moment, which is the part where we communicate, the comment section. And they've proposed a complete rework to how it should be designed. I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what they're emphasizing here, but they've put the work into this tiny little detail. And that's what I love, that they've probably spent a month at least looking on this. Experts, 20 years working in design, whatever it might be. I'm not saying the people working on full site editing on Gutenberg are not experts. They are. But this is the right person at the right time to look at the comment system in WordPress. I like the level of detail, and I would like to see those kind of things addressed by WordPress before we jump into full site editing experience. So accessibility, how you communicate with comments on WordPress, the design system, the color rules. I would love to see those things prioritized ahead of this rush for the full site editing. The social society part of this article, which I find really interesting at the moment, is there's a lot of people that don't trust what they read on the news. They don't trust what they see on social media. People are getting censored on social media. And if you have a platform where you have conversations, like a Facebook group or anything like that, you are having those conversations are happening, and your audience is not on your lawn. This is not on your property. The great thing about WordPress as a platform is that if that's where your conversations are hosted, you own that platform. No one can turn you off. The nearest you can get to being turned off is if you are hosted on Amazon or Google, and a bit like what was the app that got turned off the other day from those platforms? It was
does it begin with P?
It does begin with P.
Oh,
yeah. I can't remember.
It's like a WhatsApp type tool. Got turned off by Amazon and Google, and as a result, it couldn't operate as a system anymore. I love this because the level of detail, and I love that with people concerned about having the right platform that they own, where their conversations that happen around their audience are on a property that they own. That's why I think WordPress would be really well advised to be making the WordPress blogs a fantastic place to communicate with your audience and move away from social media.
Yeah, Go on. Sorry, Leo, you go
I've
first.
got about 4 things to unpack there. Paul, I don't disagree they should be doing this instead of doing full site editing. I think they're 2 separate things, and it's very, very dangerous if you just go down one track and don't do everything else. You need to do both at the same time. So that's a disagreement with you. There is nothing new under the sun, is a comment. And if we think back to the reality of what WordPress was set up to be, which is a blogging platform with comments, it is funny that what it was originally set up to be has drifted so far away that we forgot that it actually did this. It actually did this at the beginning of dawn of time, and it got taken over by other people on social media platforms. We were turning off the internal WordPress comments and then putting in horrible bits of code so that you ended up with the Facebook or some other blogging or thing across the bottom. And then at the end of it, but the actual thing that I absolutely agree with is it's got to look good. And so it is funny that it's going to go round in a circle. Finally, I would say your comments on not being on your own lawn is something that myself and my partner, who passed away a number of years ago, used to say all the time and still say to governing bodies and federations in sport. All that time that you spend putting and saying everything is on social media is doing nothing for your product. It is doing everything for theirs. The minute they go and watch those highlights on YouTube, they will be watching some dog on a skateboard straight after, and they have no loyalty to you.
That's great. I like that. I'm going to use that exact phrase. It's an interesting one. I get it. I've switched off comments on Facebook because essentially a lot of the work that I've done is just pages. It's got, there is no commentary. It's a page, and they don't want their contact form having comments, but you get the point. I love this article. Like Paul says, I love the attention to detail. I think we've gone completely, as Leo says, in the wrong direction. I've got Facebook comments on the WP Builds website simply because on day one of launching the podcast, I wanted to get an audience quicker. And I knew that Facebook would come pre-packaged, pre-logged in, and all of that. But I'm at the point where I'm trying to move away from as much social media as possible. Obviously, I've got my own skin in the game, and I'm going to keep going there. It's interesting. Lee Jackson, who was in the comments here, he put out a podcast episode this week about his desire to more or less shut down the social media side of his life, just because it's just leads to so many different issues. And so I think something like this, getting back to WordPress comments, is a great idea, making them look attractive, making them feel as good as the experience on platforms like Facebook. Perhaps, I don't know whether we want to be logging in from Facebook, but keeping the comments over on our side, don't know. But yeah, thank you. And there was a beautiful comment. I don't know if you saw this, Paul. Sorry, I'll just get everybody's face out of the way. From Oana, from Pixel Grade, she said, "Thank you so much for your kind words. The simple fact that you took the time to debate our article about conversations means a lot. Way too often our articles don't seem to be newsworthy, which implies media publications within the WordPress ecosystem do not cover them. Knowing that you guys zig when most publishers zag means the world to us." That's a nice comment.
Nathan,
okay.
something that I'd like to add to this discussion, which is, again, the society side of things. You were saying, maybe you would plug in your Facebook account into the commenting system or something like that. Something that Leo and I were talking about just before we went live, and Leo said, "Hey, hold that until we're live," was I was starting to talk about this idea that I had, whereby instead of the commenting system connecting to your Facebook account or your Twitter account or something like that, maybe 10 years in the future, we all have our own cloud account, which is some kind of centralized open source API. And we don't need to connect it to Facebook. We can tag whoever is in our network using our open source cloud API that connects us all without any algorithm trying to show us dogs on skateboards or whatever it might be that it thinks we're interested in, or trying to pull us back into conversations when we don't want to be, and distract us and help those platforms that, quite frankly, make trillions as a result of us engaging on their stages.
Yeah, there was a platform, and I could be misjudging what it was trying to do, but there was a platform about maybe 8, 9 years ago called Diaspora, which purported to do the same thing. It was going to be a sort of like a Facebook, but you held your own data. And I guess it would maybe poll your computer for the data that it wanted to present on the page. I can't remember how it worked, but sadly it was a gigantic flop. But it feels like its day has returned, maybe.
The problem with this, and the problem is always, is that once something gets to the size that it becomes usable, it becomes another Facebook.
Yeah.
And then the issue you have, and there was a great program. It was there's a Sunday morning in the UK, a Sunday morning program where they ask the big questions. I can't remember exactly. I think it's called something like that. The question they were talking about 2 weeks ago was about who should control social media. And the argument came back from one guy. It's like, well, we can't trust the social media companies. Okay, fine, great, understand that. So someone said, well, then we should get the government to manage it. No, we can't trust the government. So you sit there and go, that means you don't trust your elected people to manage something. So how do you want those people? How do you want to put somebody in charge of this? Well, we'll choose them. Well, that's called an election. And it's really difficult because when you get to that level, people just don't naturally trust the control that's in there. And they then want to break the system up, and breaking up these systems into, like they did in America with the baby bells of the telecoms, doesn't work, because you can't then deliver what you want to do, which is a system that enables what Paul's got a great idea. It would be brilliant, but you'll find that the control of it will just scan your eyeball, Paul, and then you will believe whatever you say.
I think it is possible, and I think the technology that could underpin it is the blockchain. It is. You could have a blockchain-based system of commenting. I mean, nobody's built it because there's nothing in it for anybody. You know, there is.
They did.
And did it just fail? Yeah.
I invested in it and I got my money back because it never ever took off.
Yeah. I feel though that but those conversations were not on people's minds at the time, whereas I really do feel that there's an undercurrent of people who are disaffected. I'm not saying it's the majority. It probably represents less than 1%, but maybe there's some scope to get that 1% on an open blogging platform. Not even a blogging platform. What am I on about? That's called WordPress. Just an open commenting system that can store bits of it all over.
It comes down to this whole issue of trust of the person, and that's why I was talking about Clubhouse earlier. Why Clubhouse at the moment has quite authentic conversations is because you can't hide behind fake names. You can't hide. You have to use your own email address. You have to use your own mobile phone number to get in, and then you can be thrown out if you misbehave. That's the problem with a lot of social media, and why we've all got mistrust of it, and why those comments. We've seen it, and companies are just as bad. You put up a product to sell something, and then your competitors have the ability to downmark your own product for no other reason than to find a competitive advantage. It's a tough call, and the legitimacy of people is hard to prove.
Well, I want to do a little bit of a segue here. I'm going to miss out that next article, Paul, and go to this one because it feels like this is the right moment for this one. So this sort of fits in the category of not really WordPress at all, but it's quite interesting. And we've been talking about comments and Facebook and so on, so it feels like a good time. We've been tracking this story for about the last 3 or 4 weeks, but essentially it goes like this. Facebook are feeling the pressure because Apple on the iOS side of things are going to start prompting people to allow tracking. So in other words, if you upgrade to the latest version of iOS at some point in the future, I don't know, I don't have an iOS device when that date's going to be. When you open up an app such as Facebook, you will have to make a decision, and the wording is the contentious bit. It says something like, do you want Facebook to track you? And so Apple have got this. Facebook have gone back with a bunch of press that they bought full page adverts in some very large publications over the US, and they're trying to push back. And so this is quite an interesting one. So it's tennis. We're on the Apple have served. We're now doing the return by Facebook. And so what they're going to do is they're going to start launching a pop-up in your Facebook app preempting you with the news that this is going to happen, in the hopes, I presume, that you will be persuaded that you should click the allow tracking option. They've got a point. I know what I would do, but their point is, they're obviously underplaying the fact that it's going to kill their revenue stream by a significant amount, and they're going more for what if you're a small business owner and you're relying on Facebook ads? All of this Apple technology is going to do is stop those people serving legitimate ads to people who just want to know what's in their local area, or they're looking for a new washing machine. We'll give them washing machine adverts and so on. But it's interesting, the sort of volleys going on. You can imagine there is no love lost between Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg at the moment, but we remain to see. I feel like Apple have got all the tennis balls, and they've got Goran Ivanovic serving, and Facebook have got me on the other side with a rounder's bat.
So they've won and lost some of these in the past. And the classic one, which actually is one month the other side of, is they took on and destroyed Adobe Flash, and that got turned off a month ago, as we all know. It finally got decommissioned last month. They've also taken on, and I would say haven't really won. There's rumors that the new MacBooks will finally go back to actually having more ports than one, and that there will be, and you won't have to convert the MacBook into every single other thing that you've ever had to plug it into. On this one, there's some really interesting views on both sides. We are, the argument that advertisers have had their own way is difficult to persuade you not, that you don't disagree. I look at this and say, what will change will be the business models to adapt. Classic example of this is that if you look at the cord cutting generation, so that's people who don't have linear TV, they're still seeing adverts, but they're seeing them in a different way, because things like Netflix and other things don't do their adverts in the way that we all grew up, where you're watching and then 13 minutes through you have this 3.5 minute advert break. So they're having to adapt, and maybe we're going to see the same thing happen. It won't mean that if anybody thinks that this will come out and that will be the end of advertising and you're never going to see adverts again, that is not going to happen.
In fact, I would say that we're probably consuming significantly more advertising time than we ever have, because we're watching our screens significantly more than we ever did, because there's just so much content of interest and it sits in our pocket. What my feeling on this is that there were unexpected consequences to the technologies that were built that nobody predicted. Nobody built the cookie for any other reason than just to keep state. He's logged in. We know he's logged in. That's him. And then people came up with ingenious ways to figure out what that did. And then you got, browser fingerprinting and all these other technologies. And it was never invented, and it became the default. An advertising industry grew up around it. But I don't know that justifies it, just because we always have done it that way for the last few years. I think now we're seeing that, well, certainly from my point of view, I think it's okay to have the technology available to say stop if I wish to stop. But I think Apple will win this one.
What I'm saying, although I wish we would, we won't. That isn't what will end up happening. We will just move. You always do. Classic example was that people were sat there and came out with adverts, and then there is a great podcast episode on Reply All, where they did the guy who invented the pop-up, and he literally apologized for breaking the internet at the time, because it was supposed to be just a small little thing that was there, and all of a sudden sites became invaded by that. Now literally everybody I know runs some sort of ad blocker to try and just keep the number of adverts down to a level that they can cope with. It doesn't stop all adverts on a site, but it just keeps that level down. That's the reality of where we are.
We're going to have to see. Maybe Facebook can, I don't know, God forbid, have a charge, put a price tag on its service, and make us all pay $20 a year or something, or a month. I don't know.
You'll pay somehow.
I don't know. Anyway, interesting.
You may not see but what you may see is you may not see charges for the core, what we regard as Facebook, but you may start seeing charges because Facebook buy content. So,
Yep.
for example, they may have the tennis next year or something like that, and you will pay for that or something like that. So there will be a service come out that way.
And Bernard making a good point that it's not really all about adverts. He's not bothered about getting personalized ads. It's all the other stuff. And of course, that's true, isn't it? It's all the other data which is being off. Oops, excuse me. I pressed mute on myself there. All the other data that's being siphoned off. Literally, I've got no idea. But watching things like the Social Dilemma, I think it was called that. It was a bit of a moment for me of pausing and thinking, boy, they really do know a large amount about me, location, and what my favored thing might be, to the point where they're able to predict that somebody's pregnant who doesn't know they're pregnant. It's just absolutely bonkers. Right. Okay. That was we weren't supposed to put that there, but Paul, what about you? You got something on this, or?
I think I'm with Apple. I just say that I'm with Apple on this, because currently I am kind of deplatforming myself a little bit if I can. I haven't got much more to say on it.
No, it's okay.
It's just it's an interesting article for those people who've dipped in even just a little bit and see what's going on here. But
yeah,
I mean, the Facebook's response with this preempted announcement on their platform, I don't know, that feels slightly misguided. I don't know how that's going to work out for people, because even all the all of the Instagram influencers, they've all been talking about. I'm not really in Instagram, but from what I understand, Instagram's terms of service updated recently and made it really difficult for the influencers to do whatever it is that they do on Instagram, take photos of themselves looking beautiful or whatnot, and but the terms of service for the end user were frightening to a certain point if you would read them in a certain way. So I think that Facebook's got a lot of money to lose here, so they've got to do something.
Luckily, they've got quite a lot of money to lose, so it's fine.
They've got a lot of money. Will there pop up? I wonder if they don't do the pop up, what would be the difference on their bottom line? How many houses could we build, Lee Jackson, with the money saved by Facebook by putting that pop up on there?
And we're hoping for an exact number to come into the comments.
How many dollars that pop up's going to make a difference? But
interesting though that it's a company that's basically almost like creating. Yeah, the regulation is created almost by another big company, almost like a government ought to do.
But as I said, I drew that parallel of the one with Adobe Flash, because the reality was we were all happy at the time using Flash, or I wouldn't say content, but they just literally said, this isn't going anywhere forward and we've got to look at it. And I do not know if this is a preemptive strike, if that's the right term, from Apple, knowing that if they don't get their own house in order, if they don't be proactive about this, then everybody else's houses are going to get knocked. And I do think it's something that we've got to see where it's going.
I also think it's a really clever marketing opportunity for them to really push the difference between iOS and Android. This is the beginning of a real divergence. Up until now, there've been features one has and that the other doesn't have, and you could argue about which one's better, I'm sure, but this is some clear blue water that's opening up. And Paul, you've just changed allegiance. Am I right? You did say that earlier, right? You bought an iOS device, and some of it was based upon this exact thing.
I think what it is that when Lindsay, my wife, said, "Why have you got an iPhone, a brand new iPhone?"
Okay.
And I said, "Because I'm concerned about privacy."
Yeah.
It was kind of one of the reasons.
Okay.
But really, I just wanted to get a new phone that was cool.
Yeah.
But in answer to Bernard's question, I pay for YouTube to get rid of the ads, although I don't really pay for it to get rid of the ads. I pay for the the premium service that gives you the music as well as a few other things on there.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting that you've gone down that route, Paul, because I haven't. Although I mean, that is literally the one and only one that I haven't gone down the route of. I still have Apple Music, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, but I haven't bought the YouTube one.
I just watch a lot of YouTube, and the amount of ads is excessive on YouTube when you're, watching one video after another. And I'm very pleased with the ad-free YouTube. It's awful when I accidentally sign into the wrong account, and it's really jarring.
I wonder. Yeah,
Facebook.
I feel
ads,
they don't push that at all.
You are joking,
No.
Nathan.
I don't
You
get.
you don't have an iPhone then. Every single time you hit a YouTube thing, it says, would you 1 month free before you can watch this video? Every single time I hit play
that's
on
interesting. No, on my Android device, which is by a third party, it's by a company called OnePlus. So I don't know if there's something else going on there, but no, I never get that. I never get told to upgrade to YouTube anything. But then I have I have various paid arms of Google, so maybe they leave me alone because they know I'm already giving them a little bit of money here and there. I don't know. Interesting. I would happily pay a little modest amount for a de-advertised Facebook, but I also want to. So, Leo, what you were just saying is a classic example of what I don't want to get into. I just want one thing for each. I don't want you paying for 2 music services. I wouldn't want to do that as an example. I just want to get everything stripped right down to the bare essentials for me and my family.
I think when you start doing the numbers, and it becomes quite frightening. And you think back to. You go back to 25 years ago and what you used to pay for. Well, 25 years ago, you paid for, 30 years ago, you paid for your TV
license. Yeah, that was it. And tax.
And tax it. So now you're paying for broadband at home, 40 to 60 pounds a year. Sorry, so 40, 60 pounds a month. These are all monthlies, aren't they? The Netflix is $9 a month. I think $8.99. Amazon is about the same. Disney Plus is $7. You've got the Apple Music, I think, is £22 a year, £24 a year for the basic one. Spotify is £10 a month. It just suddenly you're going, hold on, I'm paying.
Yeah.
100 and something pounds a month for entertainment, because obviously the Sky on top of that, or Virgin TV. It's amazing how much you're paying, and with some of those services you're still getting adverts.
Do you know, it was interesting, I read an article this week about how the new, 10 years ago we didn't really have the subscription economy that we now have, and now many of us are really fully subscribed to the subscription economy. And the article in this was saying, I can't remember where I read it, but they were basically saying that's going to move towards the consumption model. So instead of subscribing just £9.99, let's say, for unlimited Spotify, there'll be a proportion of those people who would rather pay per song. And if you're using, let's say, YouTube, and you only consume 6 movies or 6 pieces of content a month, you'd probably rather go on to that other model. But I don't know how that'll work out. But I think, because I don't consume all that much, that kind of pricing might benefit me a little bit better. But now we've got to all go and refigure our lives again. Right, last article. Have we got time for this, gentlemen?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give this one to Paul. It is WordPress.org, Gutenberg mobile pages.
Yep. So this is a plugin by WordPress, which is, I think, a developer from Cheltenham, which is not too far from where I live, actually. In fact, I've been to the Cheltenham WordPress meetup, and I was a speaker there, which was really good evening. Yeah, it's good. Good times back when we could go places. This plugin solves a big problem in Gutenberg at the moment, which is how things look on mobile. For some of my clients, I've built out pre-made block patterns to solve that problem for them. So I say, just use my block patterns. Then you won't have 3 columns, and then on mobile, your buttons are at the bottom for your products, and your pictures are all at the top, because that's what they did. This plugin solves that problem. Question I've got is, should this plugin need to exist? Should it be that difficult to do mobile friendly pages in the block editor? It is. So fantastic product for solving that problem.
I
wish the problem didn't exist in the first place. And what this does, for context, by the way, is you have your page and then you create another version of it for mobile pages.
Oh, okay.
So you have two versions of. Am I right with that, Leo?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
But it goes further than that. But yes, you're right.
Which is a fantastic solution for the end user, and it fixes a problem in the core tool that should get addressed in the core tool.
There's not a lot to say on this one from me, just other than that here it is. Go and check it out.
There's a lot to say on this, but I'll be quick. So when you talk about mobile, you've actually got to really look at the fact that there is actually 3 different outputs for mobile now from WordPress. One obviously is a mobile looking website. The second one is AMP. And the third one is for Facebook is Instant Articles. All 3 of those are built to deliver a mobile approach to there. This last weekend, today was the first round of the Six Nations. That's one of the websites we deliver. There's a very interesting figure that I just gained just before we came on to have a quick look. 2 years ago in the Six Nations, we were running around about 90% of the traffic was mobile. That's where you would expect it to be for a live weekend. Interesting, that figure's dropped back this weekend. I suspect the reason it dropped back is because of COVID and people are actually sitting at home and are able to use their PCs.
You want the best screen in the house.
In the best screen in the house. Inversely, the actual traffic figures have gone up quite significantly.
Nice.
So we've actually seen an increase, a big increase in traffic. We're talking big, but at the same time, it's been on desktop, not mobile. Now, if you look at the site that we built and you compare, if you look at it on mobile, and it's obviously designed for it because it's a very, very fast site. It's super, super fast, both on the mobile site, whereas about as close as you can get to the app, you won't see much difference from the mobile site to the app, and obviously the app's native. It is interesting that that this problem shouldn't exist.
Yes.
But this problem, the fact that this problem has been flagged up, is a serious problem that needs to be, as Paul said, why. Things should come straight out of the block editor, not only in mobile format, but from my view, they should be ready in Instant Articles and they should be in AMP as well until those disappear.
So we should just say its name. It's called Gutenberg Mobile Pages. It's by Pootle Press. It's available on the WordPress.org repo. I don't know if there's an option to sort of, I don't know if there's a freemium model or if there's any paid option, but go and check it out. See what you think. See if it adds something to your block editor. Paul, you've muted yourself, Paul. We can't hear you. Too easy.
Probably better content, to be honest. But I muted myself because my dog's running around crazy around my feet at the moment. I think she needs a wee. But my proposition, anyway, seeing as Gutenberg is a long-term project and is looking to the future, and mobile first is probably very relevant, is that things like blocks, block patterns, when an end user is building, they should be building for mobile so that they don't have the how's this going to work on mobile problem. They have a much easier problem of just making it look a bit nicer on desktop.
Nice.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
Maybe we just need to worry about the desktop for a little bit longer until everybody's been inoculated, and then we can start to forget about it all over again. I think we're done. We've basically done an hour and a half, which is kind of like the time allotted to it. So I shall. Where have you guys gone? There you are. Put us back on the screen. Thank you so much to Paul Lacey. Thank you so much to Leo Mindel from Sotic. We'll be back next week chatting about the same kind of thing with, Leo. I can't remember if you're back next week, but it might very well be somebody I know shaking his head.
I think I put myself down as once every month or so. I thought that was enough for
Yeah, well, you're very welcome.
Otherwise, Paul would have just blocked me.
Yeah, Paul put himself down for every single week. Bless him. I love him to bits. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. As I said, we'll be back this time next week, 2 p.m. UK time, wpbuilds.com/live. I'm going to end the broadcast by saying bye-bye for now.